Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language. You have been forewarned.
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast. This is a 2009 edition. We're talking single sequels. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man dragging me out of the shack, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hi, Tom.
Chicken and broccoli. Can you guess which of these 2009 single sequels that line is from?
I'm going to say Crank 2.
Yeah, of course.
High
I think the
Voltage.
accent gave it away. But one of the many
As did your
nonsensical...
impersonation.
Yeah.
Your
one
great
of
work.
the many... Thank you. One of the many nonsensical one-liners uttered in that film.
Oh, man. And there are many.
It's kind of like I liken it to Arnold Schwarzenegger having a stroke while filming one of his hard-boiled one-liner deliveries.
Yeah.
This is sort of like, okay, so Arnold, the line is "Hasta la vista, baby, go, action." Chicken and broccoli.
Arnold's most
He's
famous
just talking
line
about what he had for lunch.
of "I'll be back," he argued with James Cameron about for a long time. He always wanted to say, no, I would say, "I will be back." And Cameron would say, "Shut the fuck up and just say, I'll be back." That's the
I
fucking
wonder
line.
if that's the origin of "Up and at Them" from the Radioactive Man episode of The Simpsons. I wonder if they knew about that argument and that they were like, we can do something with this with Rainier Wardcastle trying to say "up and at them." I also love the fact that in the Simpsons version, like the dialect coach doesn't manage to talk him down. He just ends up saying it more actorally.
Yeah. Yeah.
Up and at them! Better!
I gotta tell you, this wasn't easy.
No.
So, I mean, let's tell the
people. It feels like
people.
it should be, but it's not.
Yeah. So we're here to rank the 2009 single sequels. As previously mentioned, Crank 2 High Voltage is one of those movies.
It is.
As is the Pink Panther 2.
Mm-hmm.
As is Halloween 2. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2.
Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Very important distinction, yes.
And we got Into the Blue 2.
The Reef.
The Reef, yes. Thank you. I was just going to say, I forget what comes after the colon.
There's no reason why you would remember that, so I thought I'd just throw it in, because I happen to be looking at that title right now.
Oh, great. And then lastly, Che Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
A movie I think you questioned for a second. You're like, is it really a sequel? Like, it does say
I
Part
think
2.
I think that was just me being grumpy. I think once I sat down and thought about it, I realized that it definitely should be on the list.
Mm-hmm.
And after seeing the movie, I think you're absolutely vindicated there.
Yeah, sure. It's a Part 2.
It is a
sequel.
Part 2, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, 2009 came hot and heavy with these sequels. Let me tell you.
Well, because just
not
for the
making our lives
listeners'
easy.
information. No, for the
What's
listeners'
that?
information. So just for the listeners' information, this is only half of the single sequels that were made in 2009. So we're tackling the first 5 based on availability, I guess. And at some point, we're going to follow up and do the final 5 single sequels. And initially, it doesn't make sense that there would be
I thought we were
so
going to play
many.
it off like we didn't do our job again.
No, well, I think it's more important to recognize that there are 10 single sequels made, at least 10.
That's true.
That's where
That
our
that we
incompetency
currently know
comes
of.
in.
Yeah.
Yes, at the time of recording, there are 10 single sequels made in 2009 because it doesn't make sense that there would be so many. The reboots and franchises are in full swing by this point. You'd think that would supplant the need for single sequels. But when you break it down, it starts to make a little more sense because the reboots have been out long enough now that their sequels are coming out.
Mm-hmm.
So 2 of the movies that we're doing in this run are reboot sequels.
Yeah.
You've got the direct-to-DVD market, which is still, huge. So
Thriving.
you're gonna get a low-end video sequel. We've got one in this run, and we're gonna have more in the second half.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other context that you need to think about is Hollywood playing with the idea of the multi-part film for its franchises. So Harry Potter splitting the final book into 2 movies.
Sure.
The Hunger Games is going to do it. Twilight's going to do it.
Twilight, yeah.
And all the way through to Mission Impossible in the past year, they've done it as well. So when you put all that together, you realize why there's so many single sequels in this one year, when there technically shouldn't be.
I'll say.
And
surprising.
when we do, when we take a year in isolation, it's always a grab bag. But
yeah.
this grab bag contains like both foraged wild moss and a popsicle. You know what I mean? It just runs the gamut.
Well, the other thing that I'm just sort of flummoxed by, this front half of the movies is, what does it mean for a movie to be good? What does it mean for a movie to be bad? Because,
you
there's
have to put that in a different context for every single movie.
Yeah. There's like a prestige kind of a film within these 5 films that I think had aspirations.
Yes, for sure.
Oscar or otherwise, whatever. I don't think that came to fruition, as I recall. And I'll
You're
just
talking
come out
about
and
Crank
say
High
it.
Voltage, of course.
Yes, of course. Yes. The ending credits alone show you their aspirations.
What's the opposite of aspiration?
Yeah, where they were lying with their aspirations. But the funny thing is, I remember, I'm trying to be cagey, but Che Part 2 is obviously that movie. And we'll talk good, bad later, but I'll come right out and say, I think I saw Che Part 2 in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
I saw 3 of these movies in the theater.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's only one less than you could have actually seen in the theaters. Right? Is my math correct? How you know how terrible my math is? That's correct, right?
That does sound
so.
There's
There's literally only one of these movies that you missed in the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. What can I say? Anyway, I'll just come right out and say, I think Che Part 2 might be the last movie I'd want to watch again.
Really?
Out of all these movies.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Out of all of these movies?
All right, all but one.
Well,
fuck,
this is
no. I saw 4 of these movies in the theater.
which is the maximum.
Yeah, that's the maximum. Yeah. I saw them
That's
all.
like saying you saw all these movies in the theater, because one of these movies you are not able to watch in the theater unless you rent the theater privately.
One of these movies I have no information.
Project the DVD.
Yeah, one of these movies I have no information for budget and how much money it made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is going to be interesting because from the sounds of it, I think we're going to have a lot to argue about.
Okay, good.
Because it doesn't sound like we had exactly the same experiences with these films. It was, for me, it was a journey, for sure,
Mm-hmm.
with high highs and low lows.
Oh, high
What
highs.
I was watching them through. I mean, it's such a, I always, whenever we do these, I always credit you with coming up with this format, because it I find it so fascinating because you have such different movies,
Yeah, it's really
and
it's it's
yet
it's it's such a like you said, it's a journey. It's such an interesting journey to go on.
there are these weird commonalities, like dream horses and made up quotes at the beginning of the film. So it's like it's a snapshot of like what was in the vanguard at that point in cinema history,
Yeah.
and that just adds a whole extra layer of it, for me, and helps me get through the bad times, and there were a lot of those.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think it's gonna. I think this episode is going to be interesting. But when we go through the movies individually, I think it's we're going to have some arguments.
Okay. Fascinated.
Mm.
Now, despite my earlier declaration, well, first of all, you have anything else to say before we kind of dive in, or
I don't. No, I don't think so. No, I
Okay.
think I think that's good scene setting.
perfect? Do you want to go first?
I can.
I'm going to go first. I was
Sound like
starting.
You sound like Alec Baldwin in The Departed. Do you have a perfect service record? I have a perfect service record.
You work out. You one of those workout freaks? Go fuck yourself.
At the time of recording, then he's in trouble again.
Oh, really?
Like, well, he's been recharged with
For the same shooting?
With
Yeah.
he's been double jeopardied.
You better call Tommy Lee Jones and Ashley Judd.
As the theme song to Droids goes, he's in trouble again. Gotta watch Droids, Mike. You've got to watch Droids. It's like a cartoon Rockford Files. It's amazing.
Well, I've got the time now.
Yeah, go. That's it. That's where you should, during COVID, Star Wars Vintage is the place to go.
All right. So what I was going to say was, despite my earlier declaration, to me, there is only one movie that could go to the top of this list. And despite the fact that it's the movie I would probably want to watch the least out of all but one, it is Che Part 2.
Okay. Yeah, you really you love to talk yourself out of crazy. I said this on a I think on our previous episode we were ranking our top 5 sequels from the year of podcasting. It's like you like to go right up to the line of ignoring the obvious thing to do, but you talk yourself out of it. So, just a note for the future. Go ahead, if you see yourself at that line, go ahead and jump over it.
And go crazy.
Let's see what happens.
I mean, here's the
let's see
thing.
what
Like,
happens.
I was very much reminded of the Jaws 2, Jaws 3D conversation because
Well, I can't help you out there because, as I said, I was probably wrong in my rankings for that.
yeah,
movie.
because there's one movie that I like, I think more, but one movie that I acknowledge is a better movie and a better made movie.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
this
favorite
movie
is not the
falls
same as
squarely
best.
into that category, with
Yeah.
Steven Soderbergh clearly the most capable director out of all of these people.
Well, when you put it like that, I mean,
You know?
I see why you talked yourself out of crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
I felt like I didn't have a choice.
So this is really interesting because I felt kind of hamstrung by this as well. I felt that it would be a cop out to put the worthiest of these movies at the top of the list.
Yeah, that's how I felt. Right, exactly.
I felt like it shouldn't automatically go there just because it is clearly the best made movie with the most capable cast and crew of these films.
Yes.
Which makes no sense when you say it out loud. But here's what I also put Shape Part 2 at the top of my list. And here's why. It's not because of that. It's because, first of all, I'm a sucker for a well-made historical movie.
Mm-hmm.
Mid-century American is my preferred flavor of those. So I'm already in the bag.
Okay.
But secondly, I thought about what we do on this podcast, which is to celebrate movies that are quality in their own right, but make use of the serial format to tell a continuing story. And Shape Part 2 ticks both of those boxes. So
sure.
After watching the movie and kind of thinking about it, I realized that it's a great sequel and it deserves recognition.
So I agree with all of that. There was one other thing that put it above everything else for me as well, and it has to do with the kind of, for lack of a better description, war movie that it is. Most people would say...
I think we're totally on the same page here.
Okay.
I think we're totally on the same page, yeah.
So,
the way that Soderbergh filmed warfare in this movie is so interesting.
Very.
And successful.
And it's really successful. And the thing is like I think everybody would say that every war movie is an anti-war movie. But how true is that? Like, I get the horror that Platoon makes you feel for the people that were in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this, I don't know how to describe it, this little part of cool.
Yeah.
That all war movies seem to have that hook into whatever fucked up fragile psyche is in the male ego that makes you think it would have been cool to be there. And there's none of that in this movie. And that's the thing.
No.
Like the isolation, the pain, the fear, the real true kind of horror of feeling alone even within the midst of your own unit, to me, is what really sets this movie apart. It's the most anti-war war movie I think I've ever seen, and that sets it apart for me.
I agree with all of that, and I'll go even further and say I think that most war movies, even those that propose to be anti-war, are also kind of pornographic war movies in the sense that that you're getting your kicks from seeing warfare.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, when I was back at college, reading an article by one of my teachers, V.F. Perkins, who said exactly what you're saying about Bridge on the River Kwai. He said this movie comes out at the end and tells us it's an anti-war movie, and yet it's been glorifying war throughout. It's like, this is like crying rape, It's sort of like and I thought, that made me think differently about war films. I just sort of adjusted, and I've always had that in the back of my mind, and I've always been slightly suspicious of those movies that think they can be anti-war by upping the amount of visceral, gratuitous violence in them.
Yeah.
And I think Soderbergh has found another way to go with this, where you focus on the effect on the individual and you watch people's reactions to violence.
Yeah.
And I think that is, when there's one absolutely devastating moment in the movie where you see, an act of slaughter through the eyes of a farmer who's kind of sold out the guerrillas, and it's just devastating. And I've never seen anything like that before in a war film. Not that this is just a war film, but that's a strong element of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so anyway, that's all we need to say for now, but it's also at the top of my list, but I felt that resistance because it's definitely the most self-evidently legitimate of these movies.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what troubled me, because I felt it was getting automatic credit for just being what it is, but
Hmm.
I actually think it goes above and beyond what it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing I struggled with is that it's a fairly long movie. I think it's what, like 2 hours, 11 minutes, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's
2:15.
over
Yeah.
2 hours.
Yeah.
And so much of it is repeated scenes. I mean, we're seeing kind of the same thing over and over and over. I think there's a point to that from
Very
Soderbergh,
much so. Yeah.
but it makes it kind
Very
of a
much so.
slog to get through. You know, it can become boring at times.
I don't
For
know.
me.
So yeah, no, and fair enough. And I feel like if I was watching a movie in a different milieu, I might have said the same. But there's something about that mid-century
Yeah, you respond to that.
period and locale that just it was a very even though it wasn't trying to be an easy watch, it was still an easy watch.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Just because I just I can just drink in. I mean, the scenery is so beautiful as well. I think
It
that's a
is,
big part
yeah.
of it as well. And then whenever they get into any kind of urban milieu, it just looks so it just pops with that mid-century period
Sure.
design that I'm hooked. So my eyes are already glued to the screen, and that and that means that it's less of a slog for me. But I think that's very personal.
Mm-hmm. All right.
And I don't know, it's one of the more successful attempts to do what a lot of biopics were doing at that time, which was to take one very small section of a person's life and make it represent the whole thing.
Yeah, right.
I'm thinking of like Walk the Line, it's like Johnny Cash fought an ostrich. Why the fuck am I focusing on this one period in his life? Why can't I want to see him fight an ostrich, right? I mean, that's Greek mythology shit. He fought the ostrich and survived. But this did a better job to me of like, yeah, this is totally represent. Even if you haven't seen the first part, and I have not.
Oh, okay.
Which be no surprise to anyone who's listened to prior episodes of this
Yeah.
podcast. I was like, this still tells me everything I need to know about Che Guevara,
Sure.
and
Right.
it's literally what, like a year of his life, or
Year, like,
close
yeah,
to
a
that.
year and a few days, a week maybe.
So I don't think anyone's done that as successfully as Che Part 2, possibly Part 1 has. I'm
Well, that's
assuming
the
that
other thing
covers
that's
more than
interesting
just
to
a
me
year.
about that movie is that we have context to lay on top of it about the man himself.
Yeah.
It's interesting because, of course, he was involved in getting Fidel Castro to overthrow the government in Cuba.
Mm-hmm.
But when you can layer, the idea that the oppressed become the oppressors on top of that,
Yeah.
and that Che never got to see that because of what happened in Bolivia,
Mm-hmm.
that to me is like, I would be fascinated to know what Che Guevara thought about what became of Cuba. But we never, we didn't get to,
Yeah.
he never got to find that out.
And again, it's great historical filmmaking. A great historical movie will be cyclically relevant to whatever
Yeah, sure.
we're currently going through. Like, it made me watching it in early 2024. I thought about Israel and Gaza. I thought about the capture of Saddam Hussein. It's like all of this.
I did too.
was,
Totally. Yeah.
Like some of it is intentional because it's after the fact, and then another part of it is like, this is going to happen again because that's history,
'Cause
right?
that's what we do.
And,
Yeah. Right.
yeah, that's what we do. That's one of the ways in which you've got a great historical movie on your hands, is that at some point it's going to come back into fashion in the worst way possible.
Yeah. Well, I feel we keep talking about Che Part 2 for fear of going on.
No, I'm happy to. No, I'm happy to go on. You know how they talk about that runner's high that happens after like about
Yeah.
3 miles, 5 miles, or something like that, which I've never physically experienced myself, and if we had a visual component to this podcast, you'd know why. But it's never anything I've directly experienced. But I feel like I've been watching these movies over such a long period of time, and like picking up. Like, one of these movies I started watching and then finished watching months later, and it felt like I've been doing it for so long that I almost started to get delirious and high towards the end. I mean, it helped that the last one I watched was Shay Part 2, which is a great one to go out on, but
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in a state of euphoria about it. So
Okay.
I'm happy to
Well, then I
happy to
ask you,
talk
sir,
about whatever you want to talk about.
what is second on your list?
Well, second on my
Because
list
this is
a
where the
film
rubber
that-
meets the road, isn't it? Look,
It
this is where
certainly is. Yeah.
What
We
do
can
you
both-
value?
Even this is the weird thing. Even if we didn't like Shay Part 2, we could both argue for it being the top of the list.
Right.
Incidentally, we both seem to like it quite a lot.
Yeah.
But so the second movie on my list is a movie that I don't think I understand. I don't even know if I like it. But I have so much respect for the sheer number of sideways choices made in the frame of one feature film.
Oh, I'm afraid we might have the same one.
And it's also a movie that seems to be aware of its own status as a cash grab sequel, which is something we seldom find when we do sequels. Gremlins 2 has it. I think
Yeah.
Wayne's World 2 has it. I can't think of many other examples. So for those reasons, a more second on my list is Crank High Voltage.
Oh, okay. We're different.
Oh, okay, good. And I feel like I'm out of my depth with everything to do with Crank High Voltage. I don't even feel like I understand it in the context of 2009 single sequels, because it doesn't fit into any of those boxes that I previously laid out. So
It's
this
such
film
an
does not
odd
feel
duck
like
of a movie.
it should be made in any era at all.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a film that should ever exist.
Right. And
But
the
I really admire its choices.
you do. Including all the misogyny and racism?
Stylistic choices. There we go.
Okay, fine.
Not political choices. The stylistically, I feel like there are art movies that take less risks than this movie.
Okay. That's fine. And I in spirit agree with you. You're going to be so mad at my next choice, but
That's
but
all right.
that
No,
that,
but
that makes me happy. Because I like, that's the thing with the rest of these movies, I really didn't know what to do because they're all oddballs in their own way.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over how much Crank 2, just a few years before Me Too and before this re-examining in Hollywood, like how brazenly it thinks its humor is the humor that should make everybody laugh. And so that's why it ticked down a box for me.
Okay.
And
That's inarguable. You're absolutely right.
I was kind of flummoxed by it, but I understand everything you're saying about the choices that it makes, especially say the end of that movie. What a crazy choice!
I spent the whole movie thinking, what could possibly happen next, and I never guessed right.
And yeah, you don't think that they're gonna fuck in the middle of a horse race?
Right, and then in the last few minutes of the movie, I'm like, well, I guess this is one way for David Carradine to leave this world. This is his last movie.
Yeah.
Before before he auto asphyxiated himself.
Yep.
And I gotta say, I think I think that was the less embarrassing thing that happened to him that year. Than appearing in Yellowface in the Crank High Voltage.
Yeah, you might be right. All right. Well, I can't believe I'm going to say this.
Yes, you can.
Because I can't even argue for this movie too much. It fails on so many different levels, but on one level, there was something that I got in this movie that seemed like a good choice, that I understood, that made sense. And that movie's The Pink Panther 2.
I was with you right up to the word pink.
I know.
Huh. All right.
This movie's so stupid.
Not stupid enough, I would say.
Yeah, you might be right. But there's one good idea.
I'd like it to have been made at a time where Steve Martin was not thinking more about being a playwright and playing the banjo.
Yes. That's the
and
thing.
Working more on being a.
I mean, we'll get into it when we get into it.
The world-class clown that we know he is.
Yeah.
Which he does not exhibit in that film.
The biggest problem with the Pink Panther 2, or this incarnation of the Pink Panther, to me, is Steve Martin. I think he's terribly miscast as Inspector Clouseau. And this is one of the funniest people in the world.
It's almost too obvious. Yeah, no. I think it's about where he is in his career. Yeah. I think he's in a limbo between two stages of his career where he's a viable comic actor. I think the other part is it's too obvious. At one point, I was watching the movie and I thought, wow, if you kind of do a digital composite of all the people who played Clouseau, it's gonna look like Steve Martin, Peter Sellers, Alan Arkin, Roberto Benigni. You put those three together, that's Steve. So in a sense, it's like it's the obvious choice. But I completely agree with you. It's a total misfire of casting.
Mix it all together, bake it at 350, you get Steve Martin.
But then I feel like I don't know. I'll save it. I'll save it for my
save
ranking.
it because I'm gonna probably agree with you on most of it because that's how I feel about most of these movies. But the one thing I really did respond to was the idea of Lily Tomlin as the etiquette teacher trying to teach Clouseau how to be updated.
Okay.
That's one idea I liked.
Well, I hear you. But those scenes felt to me like cut for time SNL sketches. That did not belong in the movie.
Fine.
But I'll throw you this bone.
Mm-hmm.
Great work by Andy Garcia.
Yes.
In fact, one of the ways in which I kind of I
like everybody in this movie except Steve Martin.
One of the ways in which I got through Pink Panther 2 was thinking that Andy Garcia was playing his character from Godfather 3. And there's nothing really in the movie to contradict that.
I like the guy who says, the flambe terrorist.
Mm-hmm.
That's good stuff.
It's an interesting, and we'll go back to this, but I think the verbal comedy can be pretty good in the movie, but the visual comedy and the physical comedy is awful. I think that's where the movie falls down.
I think you and I are on the same page.
But
the verbal comedy for me was enough.
There was some good verbal comedy in there, and because Steve Martin worked on the screenplay, I think most of it's coming from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
There are two or three gags where I'm sure were written by Steve Martin.
Mm-hmm. I thought the same thing.
They're cleverer than anything else in the movie.
Yeah.
Anyway, it'll be no surprise. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
It'll be no surprise to you that is not the next film on my list.
I guess not.
given how I'm talking about it. But bet you're wondering what could, given what the remaining choices are, what could it possibly be?
Oh, there's one I firmly believe it will be. Because it's a dandy little B movie of nonsense to me.
Okay, so the third movie on my list is a film that, up until what you just said, I suspect you think I hate because of the gratuitous. Maybe you know me better than I think you do. The gratuitous underwater footage, and given what I've thought about what I've said about video sequels in the past. And now, listen, I am painfully aware of this film's limitations. Okay?
Yeah.
However, I ended up being quite taken by how straightforward, uncomplicated, and transparent this movie was. I'm increasingly drawn to movies that don't try to bullshit you into thinking it's something it's not. And
Yeah.
on the level of an exploitation movie and the blatant religious subtext, I felt like this movie delivered on everything it was trying to do, was upfront about it, was what it was trying to do throughout. So somehow the next movie on my list is Into the Blue 2, The Reef.
I love that.
Yeah.
I feel the same as you do. The thing that fucked around with me was so I have Crank 2 and Into the Blue 2, and I didn't know where to go. I respect Crank 2, I guess I'll say, as a real movie more than Into the Blue 2.
It's hard, isn't it? It's hard.
It's not easy. But
it's not a real it's not a real movie in any sense that I understand.
Yeah,
exactly. I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah. But like you, I don't know what happened while I was watching.
It went down easy.
When I was watching Into the Blue 2, The Reef, it went down so easy.
It took the burden off you as the viewer to interpret anything,
yes,
to do any kind of cognitive work, and I am so grateful for that kind of a movie in my current frame of mind.
The only thing it made me do at any point was wonder why the cast is playing volleyball against the cast of Survivor and like The Hills. But beyond that, it's all so straightforward. So yeah, I mean, Into the Blue 2. The Reef,
I mean, even that is explainable
by
explainable by stunt casting.
I guess, yeah, but it seemed so oddly placed. And
yeah, well, it's like what do you do when you can't have production values? You do whatever you can, and it's like will they come for will these guys come and film a volleyball scene for us?
Right,
sure,
right.
Get them in the
it's
movie.
Funny because when I'm watching a movie like Che Part 2, and I'm watching Benicio del Toro, and I'm watching a great actor do great work, and even like the Pink Panther 2, I'm watching a great comedian miscast, but I'm still watching a great comedian. Like you said, I'm watching Andy Garcia, I'm watching Alfred Molina. Like, I'm watching people I really, really like and respond to. And there's that thing about star quality. And there's not a lot of star quality.
That's zero star quality.
Like, when you're watching that movie, you realize, okay, yeah, this is like a buff guy. And I guess maybe he's handsome. But that's it. you know. But all I could do the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, look at them out there. They're doing it. They're really
Yep.
doing it. They're putting their effort
That's
in.
it.
You know?
So they came into that movie with a plan, and they were like, okay, this is the limit of what we're doing. The important thing is we never stray outside those limits on either end.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was conveyed to everyone involved, and everyone involved stuck to that guideline. And the movie that they it's interesting because I when the movie was over, I thought I would never watch a movie like this by choice. But if I was the kind of person who would, I get everything I would need.
Yeah, absolutely. That's if this is the kind of movie you would like, you'd be one of those 5 stars on Prime that they read at the end of how did this
get made? That are often misplaced product reviews.
Yeah, right.
I was like, it heats fantastically. What?
Oh man.
Yeah. Okay, so far, you put Pink Panther 2 second. Is that right?
I did. Yeah.
So next on your list is, oh, go on. Well, you tell me, but I assume it's Crank High Voltage.
Yeah.
Okay. Just because of how you were agonizing between the two and the other movie that we're dealing with.
We both know.
I kind of, well, I don't know if we do actually, but yeah. So Crank High Voltage lost out to Into the Blue 2.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
And again, is it down to misogyny and racism, or is it?
Yeah, mostly.
More. Okay, content. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah.
You've got a case for sure.
I do.
You've got a watertight case when if you're gonna, you know, if that's gonna be your.
If it was a 2000 film, I might rank it higher, but it's a 2009 film.
Interesting.
You know, it's fascinating to me what Hollywood was doing at that time and saying, "Oh yeah, no, this is great." Cuz that movie it's got I think it's a pretty high Rotten Tomatoes. I have to go back and look, but critics liked that movie. Not like huge,
I think
but
my devil's advocate here would be to say that sex and violence are amplified to the point that they don't exist in the real world anymore, and that there's a problem applying real world criteria
values
to them, which is a bit of a cop out, and you know is exactly what a racist, sexist person would say in defense of their racist, sexist movie. But I feel like, given what this movie does stylistically, that is worth kind of keeping in mind, because it is a movie that wants to venture outside the norms of filmmaking, and both in content and style, very clearly. So that's why it's kind of higher on my list than it is to yours. But I can't disagree with what you're saying. Like I said, I don't even know if I like this movie or understand what it is. So. Yeah. I think what you're talking about is a big part of that. Like, why this movie? And why then?
Well, I guess the question for you is, will you put Rob Zombie above the Pink Panther 2?
It's a good question because, listen, I like to give credit where credit's due.
And it's due?
Which may come as a surprise to anyone who's listened to this podcast before. But I actually do. And one of these two movies is so above and beyond its original, the original reboot that these movies are sequels to.
Don't you dare.
That it's worth mentioning because...
Don't you dare.
I mean, not to the point where it's acceptable for release. but to the point where you can see a filmmaker making choices. Do those choices work? No. Does anything in the movie work? No. But
Wow.
that level of improvement is the credit I'm giving the movie, and the credit I'm giving the movie is by not putting it at the bottom of the list. So Halloween 2 is next on my list.
Wow. Tom.
It's a gear shift up in filmmaking from Halloween.
I don't know that it's that. I don't know that it's remarkably up in filmmaking, but I think it's a remarkably better film.
It is, yes.
Yeah.
So so there was. You've seen Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares, right?
Yeah. Here and there. Not an avid
yeah.
watcher, but
Me neither. But I more watched it when I more watched the British original than the American version. But I do remember there was this one Kitchen Nightmares where Gordon Ramsay goes into a kitchen and the guy is disorganized. Head chef is disorganized, and making terrible food. Okay, so like every episode begins this way, the same way. And by the end of it, usually what happens in a Kitchen Nightmares, the format is Ramsay improves the food and he figures out how the kitchen should run. And he at least leaves it in that state before he comes back and does another episode where it's all fallen apart again. But anyway, but in this episode ended differently where the guy was still making terrible food, but the kitchen was running smoothly, and he just kind of left it at that. He was like, look, I'm never going to like the way this guy cooks.
yeah.
There are fundamental flaws that cannot be changed without just changing this guy, like getting another chef. But
Right.
the kitchen runs well now. Like they're cranking out food in a way that is commensurate with a real restaurant. So bye-bye. And that's the way I feel about Rob Zombie here. I'm like, look, I'm never going to like the way this guy makes an omelet.
Sure.
Makes omelets out of his films. And there are eggs in this film again. But but he's raised his competency game, or people around him have. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a...
I don't know how much he's raised it. He's cross-cut happy, and he's extreme close-up
But
happy
that's the...
in a way that I don't...
But the individual quality of the filmmaking within that is a whole nother level from Halloween, I think.
All right.
Halloween 2007. So, but...
I'm not sure shaking the camera while smashing somebody's head has the visual impact that he thinks it has, but...
Well, he's always going to do... That's the thing. He's always going to do that. He's always going to make a terrible omelet. Right? You know, it's not... This is Rob Zombie we're talking about, and at some point...
And yet I can still acknowledge that I think that this is I can't believe I'm saying this, a better movie than that original Halloween.
And I mean so self-evidently so.
Yeah, I think so too.
Which again is not to say that it should have been made or anyone should have signed off on its release, but that's my I'm gonna acknowledge that, you know, that small improvement.
Yeah.
By not putting it at the very bottom of the list.
So yeah, I mean, for me, it's at the bottom of my list.
Sure.
Like I said, I'm gonna go Crank High Voltage 2. Because of its quirky weirdness, there's no way I can put it at the bottom of the list. Obviously, you and I disagree completely about Pink Panther 2. That movie just sort of sits within a genre of comedy that I understand and am familiar with. And it's not, it's not the world's greatest comedy, but there's people in it doing some things that I like. And I think it just goes down easier than any of these other movies, and that's why it's so high at the top of my list. Acknowledging that it is a movie filled with problems and not nearly as funny as it thinks it is.
Or should be.
Yeah, or should be. Especially considering the cast. But like I said, I think that whole series was fucked from the start because I think Steve Martin is miscast as Inspector Clouseau.
Yeah, they have. I mean, it's been it's an almost impossible recast, I think.
Yeah, I mean, who would you get? You'd have to do something.
Well, they went Ted Wass, then they went Roberto Benigni, and then they went Steve Martin.
Yeah.
None of them have stuck around for long.
Yeah, I think that's the.
I mean, don't do it. I mean, why?
Right.
Why
do it at all?
Inspector Clouseau.
But it's like I think people think of somebody like Steve Martin or Will Ferrell or
it's not fucking Iron Man or
right.
It's like it's Inspector Clouseau, a character from a '60s comedy movie that turned into a franchise. I mean, it's not. He's not iconic in the way that characters who like a James Bond or a Superman or anything like that.
I think they think of him that way, though.
I know, and it makes no sense to me because it's not even Peter Sellers' best work.
Yeah, right.
And it's actually probably my least favorite Peter Sellers comedy character. And
I'd
yeah,
have to
it
think
is
about
thought
that.
of as
I mean, I loved those Pink Panther movies as a kid.
I don't dislike them. I just think that knowing what Peter Sellers is capable of, it's a it's a shadow of what of his.
It's possible we
his
should
abilities.
do them. I think they were all on Max recently.
I absolutely would love to do them.
I don't know if they're still there or not.
I don't think so. At some point, we'll definitely have to do them because they're. That's the other problem here is they went for a very with the Pink Panther 2. They went for a very straightforward follow-up sequel, and the actual Pink Panther movies don't do that because the second movie is a shot in the dark, which is a totally different story. It's just kind of a like a drawing room murder mystery with Clouseau in it.
Yeah,
and there's even the Alan Arkin one in between Pink Panther and
that's right. Yeah,
shot in the dark. So. And again, like it comes down to like you think the cast is the most important thing, but you got to get the right director too. Mm-hmm. And
well, we
guess
know
who's back in our lives.
Yeah.
It's Mr. Harold Zwart,
Harold Zwark.
Karate Kid 2010. No, so yeah. Anyway, we'll talk anon. It's at the bottom on my list, and my biggest problem with it, and it's interesting that we're doing a snapshot of 2009 because I think the biggest problem with this movie is it was made in 2009. I would prefer to see literally anyone in this movie in a different year before or after.
What do you mean?
Like
Why?
Earlier Steve Martin, later Steve Martin, earlier John Cleese, later John Cleese.
Yeah.
Like it feels like it's the wrong time for everyone to be making this movie.
All right.
And that's my biggest problem with me. And again, a good comedy needs balance, and this doesn't have it because, you get these moments where the verbal comedy is very good, but the slapstick is generally pretty bad. Mm-hmm. So it's smart, and then it's broad, and then it goes back and forth between the two in ways that it just doesn't fit together for me as a film.
That's fine.
In its genre.
It's one of those movies I can sit and watch and not pay too much attention to, and then have a good time.
Okay.
That's not a ringing endorsement, but
no, I mean,
but
no.
In the land of 2009
but I think
sequels,
Into the Blue,
I ended up appreciating that.
Right, but I'd still say that Into the Blue 2 does a better job at that.
Yeah, you might be right.
Despite its limitations.
I might have to. I did struggle with where these three movies, Pink Panther, Into the Blue, and High Voltage, Crank 2, High Voltage, where they should all sit. I went into this saying I don't know what I'm going to do, and maybe I'll regret it in the end after we talk about these, but it's where I am now.
That's not an unreasonable list that you just put together.
Mm-hmm.
I think out of the two of them, mine is much more arguable because of how high both Crank and Halloween are in the list.
Oh man.
But when I come out of this run as high, it might be I might feel differently. You know, I might because after the runner's high becomes the runner's remorse, where you're like, it's like, okay, so every time to achieve that, I have to suffer 3 to 5 miles of feeling the worst I ever feel in my life.
Yeah, right. Well, the other thing for me was I watched 2 of these movies. As you know, we had some hullabaloo going on with the Indiana Jones series where we didn't know we were going to be able to do it at the end of last year. So we had started 2009. So I had watched Pink Panther and Crank 2 High Voltage so long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And...
Well, your memory of them is still accurate given what you're saying, so
okay.
I don't think it's,
well,
I don't
all
think
right.
that's the issue here.
Good. All
And I
right, let's
assume
talk...
you've seen both of them before as well, which I had not.
Yeah. That's how insane I am. Let's talk good, bad.
Okay.
Now, are we both going to say Che Part 2 is a good movie?
I think it's a very good movie, and surprisingly so. As I say, I did not see either Shay Part 1 or Part 2 when it came out. I was wary of it. I'd seen Walter Salas's The Motorcycle Diaries, and I felt like a Steven Soderbergh directed Benicio del Toro vehicle would be the kind of Americanized, star-studded Hollywood biopic version of the Che Guevara story, and that's what I thought they were. And I was, to use your word, flummoxed.
Yeah.
By how much that was not the case. There's a couple of moments where it kind of strays into that, but for the most part, Benicio del Toro is atypically restrained.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we've already talked about how Steven Soderbergh's direction is equally understated and actually doing something very interesting with the genre it's in.
Yeah.
It's a really well... I mean, it's based on a diary, and they do a fantastic job of translating that into, a screenplay with acts and scenes. So yeah, I think it's a very good movie. I mean, it's not perfect, as I have a couple of issues here and there, but it's definitely good, and I think far better than it had any right to be.
Yeah, I can't do anything but call it a very good movie.
Yeah.
But like I said, I was just like waiting for it to kind of, oh God. I get what you're doing. I get that they're isolated. I get there, but now I'm isolated.
But just look at how good the hills and the trees look in the background. That's what I do whenever
there was one
it's
moment.
Like if you zone out, there's something nice to look at.
There was one moment in particular when I can't remember who gets shot, but he's on the ground and they're tending to him, and then he just has this shot, a point of view shot of him with the trees waving in the wind above his head. That's so beautiful. I almost couldn't stand it, And the juxtaposition
There's a few shots
of those things with against each other really stood out.
And Soderbergh makes a lot of hard choices. Like you sort of think, oh, this is the most difficult way you could have filmed this, but it looks so smooth on screen, it's worth it. There's a panorama in here. I'm like, oh, that must have been a bitch to choreograph. You could have done that so many different ways. That would have been less labor intensive, but you went there because you knew it was the right choice. And it's interesting. Like I don't like
when they're on the hills.
Like
you mean like that stuff?
They do this panorama.
The soldiers
and you
coming
see
down.
The troops emerging from the grass. Oh my God! I'm just like you picked the most difficult. Possible.
And as it's panning, all of a sudden somebody pops up right in front of the camera and starts moving down. That stuff. It's great.
Yeah, it's just, and I've liked Steven Soderbergh films. I've liked Benicio del Toro films, but I never actively seek them out separately or together. So it was surprising. It was surprising to me. It's like I know they're capable of great acting and directing, but I didn't think that this vehicle would bring out quite so much good in both of them.
Yeah.
It's not a Benicio del Toro you see in a lot of his performances. He earns his bigger moments in this film in a way that he doesn't in, say, The Last Jedi or even The Usual Suspects, which is, different because that's calculated bigness.
Yeah, right. Unplanned bigness too. They didn't know he was going to do that.
Quite, yeah. They didn't know he was going to do any of that, and still to this day, now it's what gets you through having to watch a Kevin Spacey movie. That and Gabriel Byrne's amazing face. He's just like, just focus on that. I know Kevin Spacey's
gonna be
all
right.
over this movie.
You're gonna feel bad when he escapes at the end.
Yeah,
but for totally different reasons.
In retrospect, Kevin Pollak should have just done his William Shatner impression, because then we'd have wanted to go back to it and watch it more.
All right, should we cut to the chase? Are any of these other movies good?
I'm struggling. There's one or two that I'm struggling with, amazingly. Crank, High Voltage is... as I said, I feel out of depth with it because I don't necessarily understand what it is trying to do. So how can I say whether it's good or bad at doing that? Mm-hmm. My instinct is to say it's a good movie because I think it's trying to be a hyper violent, hypersexual live action.
I think it is successful at what it's trying to do for sure, but I don't know that makes
it doesn't take itself and crucially it doesn't take itself too seriously.
That's
if
true.
That's what it was going for, I think it nailed it. However, in the back of my mind, I feel like this movie is a horrible misfire, and I'm just not getting quite how far it's missing the mark of what it's trying to do. I always have that nagging feeling in the back of my mind that I missed something crucial about what this movie is trying to do versus its execution. So
see, I'm more. I think it's nailing what it's trying to do. I don't know that it should have been trying to do it.
Agreed. Well, stylistically, yes. Politically, no.
Right.
Which is why I struggle. But in the end, there's not. It's full of, and again, I don't know this area of cinema well enough to sort of, like, I haven't watched a lot of Jason Statham movies. Like, I don't regularly watch this kind of modern action cinema, so I've got no point of comparison.
Well, go out and see The Beekeeper.
Control experiment. I'm not going to go
me.
and see The Beekeeper. But I can't imagine that any of them go to this extent of creative risk taking.
Right.
I mean, I was assumed that they were just like Jean-Claude Van Damme films, or we just like churn them out, right? Just keep as long as he's kicking people the right way, that's all that matters. But Crank High Voltage was like, no, I mean, this is like Jason Statham is the least interesting thing about this movie.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't see a lot of films like this, so I'm gonna say it's a good film.
All right.
With that caveat that I don't see a lot of these kinds of films, and I've never really seen a film like this, and for some reason that adds up to me as it being a good movie.
Yeah, its cavalierness was just a little bit too much for me in terms of politically.
Well, but okay.
And I didn't react
it's
well
bad
to
taste.
it. Yeah.
It's in poor taste.
Yeah.
But I think that is what they're going for overall. Whether they have the right to do that is
I don't know,
question.
Yeah. That's the part where I'm like, yes, I think that's what they're going for, but to me, it's a blind spot of, I don't think they're doing it ironically. I think they think these things are really funny.
No.
And that's
I don't think they're doing it. I don't think they're doing it ironically. I think they're doing it in bad taste.
Yeah.
With an awareness of quite how offensive what they're doing is.
Right.
But not challenging that in any way.
So, yeah, I don't know. For those reasons, I gotta call it a bad movie.
Okay.
I didn't react too well to that movie this time around. And I think it has...
You liked it more the first time you saw it?
Yeah, I think I did. And I think I felt guilty about it.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
Oh, so this is the sort of like watching yourself get caught on camera.
Yeah.
Doing
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly.
Versus the experience of doing it where you're like, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
And then someone films it, shows you, go, oh, that's pretty
Oh,
fucked
yeah,
up.
I did. I that wasn't nice what I did there. I should not have kicked that grandma.
But at the time, it seemed like really the only thing I could
like
do.
the only choice was to kick that fucking grandma. She was being really loud.
She didn't seem to mind.
Yeah.
But now I can see that was worse.
Now that I see it was horror on her face. She wasn't laughing.
Now I see that she made that choice of saying it's okay because she was in fear of me. I get it. Yeah. It's a total grandma kicker of a movie. I cannot disagree
totally.
with you there.
Yeah.
I think that term needs to go forward into our descriptions of movies. Is it a grandma kicker?
Yeah. I
Is
feel
it a movie where you look back and you're guilty about having watched it?
I feel about I started the one I started wrestling with for reasons unbeknownst to me completely, because how could it possibly be a good film? But Into the Blue 2, The Reef, to me,
that's my other one.
like working on its own terms,
Working on exactly.
was the closest I got to good.
It does not overextend itself.
No.
Which I feel like for a direct-to-DVD movie is pretty much the whole game.
Yeah, right?
Actually, it does overextend itself just at the end. But in a way that's just like, I hold my hands up, we ran out of budget.
That's not our fault.
I know, it's like, look what the kind of movie we are. What did you expect?
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah.
Fuck. So here, this is where value comes into play, because it's like, it's clearly bad filmmaking, but
Right.
it's good video.
Uh-huh.
This movie gives good video. And that's what it is. It's video.
Well,
it's never
I
meant
kind
to
of
be
felt
shown in a
what I
theater.
found myself relating this movie to was Omen 4.
Yeah, I thought
know?
about your description of Omen 4 there, where you were like, well, what do you expect?
Yes, a Canadian made for
Could
TV
this possibly be
Canadian
better than it
movie? Like it exceeded all expectations.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you can rationalize that by comparing it to the other Omen films. In that, when we were doing that ranking. Here, you're quite
right.
literally, pun intended, at sea, because
Well,
your
that's
points
the-
of comparison are so disparate. You
That's
can't,
the weird-
You
that's-
can't link it to anything
Yeah.
else.
That's the weird part, right? Where I labeled the Pink Panther 2 above that movie, but I'm completely comfortable saying that's a bad movie.
Yeah,
And
because
yet
that was meant to be that it was a wide release theater
Yeah.
movie, and it's not.
Yeah.
It's not excelling on those terms.
Right.
Into the Blue 2 is I think most people would agree, pretty decent video sequel. If you ended up being forced to watch that movie,
Yeah, right.
you wouldn't bear a grudge against having done that. I don't think.
Maybe, I don't know. I think you and I are different.
I think age is what I this is where I feel old, because I'm just like, I know there are better movies I could be watching out there, but right now
Sure.
I feel okay
Yeah.
that this is the movie I'm watching.
Yeah. The whole time
again, it
I was
goes-
watching Into the Blue 2, The Reef, I thought, this is not a night wasted. Like, I'm having a good time.
Put that on the back of the DVD box, right? Not a night wasted. People are like, Jesus, this must be a good video sequel.
Yeah.
Look what it says there.
You know what?
But again, it goes back to
Fuck it.
to this
Strictly
kind
on
of...
those terms, I'm gonna call it a good movie. I had a good
But
time.
I kept thinking, I kept relating it to, like, you know, other weird fascinations I have with totally middle of the road media, like, I mean, extensively discussed in our Twilight episodes, or
Yeah.
you know, I talked about how sometimes I want to get away from it all and put on a Lifetime movie, and I
Sure.
don't want it, specifically do not want it to tax me. That's why I'm watching it. That's why I'm turning it on. And that's all I'm judging it against, you know, and it's, in food terms, it's Velveeta and shells. It's like, yes, of course there's something better I could be eating right now, but is it going to scratch the itch that I've got right now? No.
Right.
For simplicity and comfort. And Into the Blue 2, sadly, for where I am now in my life, delivered that.
So does that mean it's good?
I would say I'm going to say it's a good movie.
All right.
Yeah. I can't turn around after that discussion and then say, actually, though, I do think it's a bad movie. I'm not going to Star Wars prequel you.
You'd probably be right.
But in context, it's it works. I don't know how else to put it.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
For what it is, and is no pretense to be anything other than it is. I feel like it's a movie that could have gone in two different directions at the development stage. It could have either done what it, you know, be kind of a mainstream direct-to-DVD movie, or like you know, one of those kind of Showtime after hours movies.
Yeah, right.
That's like
Totally.
softcore sex film. Like, I felt that there's a point in the screenplay where, you know, they could diverge into either of those.
Yeah, a silk
And it did
stockings.
not. Yeah, right. It just kind of like, you know, Red Shoe Diaries, or kind of
Red
like...
Shoe Diaries. Yeah,
I
that's
thought
the one.
if,
Yeah.
like, if these two couples decide they're going to just start having sex with each other, that's the movie it will become.
That's the movie we'll watch. And then it'll become, you know, an early 90s, you know, like a Consenting Adults, Final Analysis, like that wave of those psychosexual movies that came out because of Basic Instinct.
Or kind of you know, like a Skinamax kind of movie.
Yeah.
So that's the level we're dealing at here.
Yeah.
So you can't, you can't, I don't think you can apply rigorous cinematic criteria to it in the way that you can the others, and certainly Shape Part 2.
Yeah. All right. I think that just leaves
But
us
yeah,
with
it's a
Halloween
bad...
2.
Halloween 2's bad. Yeah, it's a bad movie.
Yeah, it's bad.
Rob Zombie's bad. I mean, he's incapable of making a good movie. I gotta just... He is. I mean, he's... But he seems to have surrounded himself by people who know how to light a scene and hold a camera still. And that makes a huge difference. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know how still that camera is. Certainly not during murder
Stiller
scenes.
than it was. And I watched these back to back. That's how long we've been doing this. I've watched Halloween and Halloween 2 pretty much back to back. So when you do that, you realize that we've gone up a level.
All right. One rung.
One rung, yeah. We're one rung of the ladder.
It's one rung on the ladder.
From the worst thing that's ever happened in cinema. It's one rung above lava, basically. Above a sea of molten lava devouring everything in its wake.
Oh, mercy. All right. Well, that's it.
Yeah. What an interesting discussion.
Consider these movies ranked and Declared.
I don't think we've ever covered quite a range of films.
I
in
know,
one
right?
episode.
Yeah, from the lackluster slapstick of a Pink Panther 2 to the porn gore of a Halloween 2, and then everything in between. Yeah.
Well, interesting. Like that, each movie's take on violence is very different.
Yeah. Yes. Right.
Even down to the Pink Panther.
Yeah.
And, I consider slapstick to be violence.
Yes,
it's just
it is,
violence.
yes.
Violence done differently, right?
Yeah.
It's what it is. But each film has its own take on that of how we do it.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of interesting things to say about one particular fight scene in Into the Blue 2, which I feel like went above and beyond the call of duty of what was demanded of those actors.
Okay.
Those actors are still talking about that today. It's like, see that scar? Into the Blue 2.
Look forward to that, everyone. All right, there you have it. We've ranked and declared for the 2009 single sequels, or at least half of them. You're going to have to tell us what you think
It's only the first half.
of these 5 films. What do? You know what to do. Come on, send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Go ahead and find us on Facebook or Instagram. The government has given way too much control to Elon Musk, so don't do anything for him. That's it. When you hear us next, we'll be talking Halloween 2.
Fuck you, NASA.
Yeah. All right. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
Sugar cane, sweet, sweet sugar cane, sweet, sweet sugar cane. You know what song that's from? The movie that's from?
It's got to be Into the Blue too.
It is. It's one of the many songs on that soundtrack that is Jamaican adjacent. Without being actually recorded by a Jamaican artist.
While they ride jet skis.
Yeah, exactly. And predictably, I could not find a recording of that song online. But looking at the songwriting credits, I feel like I'm validated because the two people who wrote that song are called Nick Frost and Jeff Siegel. So I don't think either of them have Jamaican heritage.
I don't think so. No, yeah.
Yeah. That's what I like to call a J Mason. Jamaican adjacent music.
All the more reason to watch that movie.
Yeah.
Oh, mercy.
Cinemax. Get that Cinemax add-on.
Yeah, man.
Get your free trial, watch Into the Blue 2 The Reef, and then cancel it. That's what I did.
All right, everyone.
What lives we lead.
What lives. We'll be back soon. Thanks for listening.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries,